Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960. Jamie Watt is a best-selling author of a new book, What I Wish I Said, a collection of the most thought-provoking Toronto Star columns from the last 6 years, but with a twist. After each column, Jamie responds with what he wishes he had said instead of what he actually said. It's a candid and humorous look at recent times, and in this unique collection, Jamie presents fresh political insight and pulls no punches in critiquing his previous opinions and beliefs. When he's not penning a column for the Toronto Star and writing a best-selling book, he is the chairman of Navigator Limited, Canada's leading high-stakes strategic advisory firm that he founded in 2000. Jamie Watt, welcome to the show, sir.
Hey, Brian, thanks for having me.
My pleasure. So tell me a little bit about this book. Why did you want to write this book? Why do you want to criticize yourself? Why do you want to comment on how your opinions have changed? Most people, have this attitude of my opinions never change.
I don't get that, Brian, for the life of me. I think there's lots of things you wouldn't want to admit or you wouldn't want to tell people about, but I don't get how. I think having mature reflection, thinking about things, having a different perspective, seeing the world in a new light, I think that's healthy. And I actually don't understand why no one's done it before. No one has ever written a book like this before. So I thought after doing this for a long time now, number of years, that it was time to look back and see what you got right and what you get wrong. A lot of writers, it's almost a trope, a cliche that they talk about, the writer's block, the tyranny of the blank page. How do you start? Where do you go? Well, that's not a problem for me. I write for a living. And if I had that, I would be, I'd be out of business. So what I worry more about is 2:00 on Friday, because at 2:00 on Friday, ready or not, that column goes. Okay? We push send and it goes off to the newspaper. If you ever watched one of those cooking shows, when they ring the bell and whether that little floret is on the top of the cake or not, like it's not going on and you're getting judged. And so I feel the same way. And I wake up on Saturday mornings and I think, damn it, I wish I'd said this, or, sometimes use the same word twice, or, should have been a semicolon. But then over time, I also have substantive changes. And I realized that, in my haste to get the column out in a week, that I missed some things. And so I thought it was a good idea to go back and look at them. And anyway, that's what we did.
Give us a taste. What do you think? Not your biggest mistake, because, that would be one thing. But where's your biggest opinion change, either about a person or an issue?
Well, I think in a way it's both a mistake and an opinion change. And that was with Trump. I wrote about Trump. There's a famous cartoon, Brian, you and I are about the same age. People our age will remember it was an Aslan cartoon in the Montreal Gazette after René Lévesque was elected. And he said, okay, everybody, take a Valium, everything's going to be fine. And I sort of parodied or parroted that, I guess, and said, when Trump was elected, okay, everybody, take Ativan, calm down, it's going to be fine. He'll be a nuisance, he'll be an embarrassment, it'll be 4 years of, turbulence. But at the end of the day, America's a strong democracy. She's existed for, a long time. The markets will function, civil society will function. And when it's all said and done, he will be washed away like a sandcastle, that kids make on the side of the beach in the summertime. And I didn't realize how wrong I was about that. I didn't understand, because they have a different system than we do, how bloody many judges he appointed. And we talk about a focus on the judges of the Supreme Court, and that is a very big problem, to be sure. But he appointed lots and lots of other judges, and those judges are going to be his legacy. And they're going to be there bringing their opinions, threatening women's right to choose, other things for a long, long time. I didn't understand that. And I certainly didn't understand the gravity of it. On the other hand, I'm not sure that I could have just, in a couple of days when I was thinking about it. But as I thought about it and I saw what was happening, I really realized I got that one wrong. I missed it. And I should have been much more worried about Trump. He's not being a nuisance. He's fundamentally changing America as we know it.
But let me ask you two questions on that, if I could. First of all, do you think Biden should appoint more judges? I understand that he has the right to actually expand. FDR actually attempted that in New Deal timing back in, I guess, the 30s. Do you think Biden should do that?
So that's an interesting question because on the one hand, I say yes because I'm fed up with these people. They all lied when they did their confirmation hearings. Oh no, don't worry, RV Wade is is settled law, and then as soon as they get appointed, get behind closed doors, they change their mind. So I'm fed up with these people, and I'm actually very worried that they're going to come after an issue that's very important to me, which are equality rights, and because it basically signaled that they're going to do that. And I actually don't think that they're honorable. I think that the unbelievable conflicts of interest, the lack of disclosure through these massive personal donations, they're getting trips and all these things. I think it's absolute craziness. And I don't think it's befitting, that most important court, one of the most important courts in the world. So I would say yes, he should. On the other hand, you've got to be a bit careful about that because turnabout is fair play. And one of the things we know in politics is it always ends up being the other people's turn, right? So at some point, it's always good. The shoe is always going to be on the other foot. And this is the thing, people in opposition are always doing the craziest things. And you say to them, well, you know what, Buster Brown, you're going to be there one day. And are you sure you want to be held to the same standard? Are you sure you want the other side to be doing to you what you're doing to them? So I think you got to be a little bit careful in that. So I actually don't have a firm opinion on it yet. In the short term, yes, I think it would be a good thing to do, but I need to understand better the long-term consequences and not make the same mistake on having my opinion on that set as I did on Trump. So I don't think I know 100% enough about it to firmly decide, but certainly it's an attractive idea in the short term for sure.
The most amazing thing to me, looking at what's going on with Trump in the United States, is his hold on the Republican Party and how, given all these indictments and January the 6th and everything he's done and the policies that some of the crazy policies that he had in place, that the Republican Party, that the base of the Republican Party and that the leadership of the Republican Party has stood by him. I really would have thought, and you see in so many other situations where parties turn against their leaders when they see some wrong, it appears the Republican Party has no principles, no backbone at all.
I think it's partly because it's a duopoly, right? It's one or the other, and so their political behavior, behaves very differently than countries that have a multi-party system. Because when you have a multi-party system, you might not like the other, but there's different dynamics at play. Right. So just because you're opposed to one doesn't mean you go to the other. But in America, you only basically have a choice. If you're opposed to what Trump's doing, you have to go to the Democrats. And of course, it is such a polarized society, and that you get the situation or improbable to most Canadians, and people would actually hate Democrats more than Trump, which just seems bizarre to us. But that's the situation that they're in, right? My friends who are Republicans in the States, they are beside themselves over Biden and beside themselves over Democrats. So they actually, and remember, it started with people not caring about Trump's sexual behavior, right? People said, oh, well, fine, I don't really care what he does. It's a bit embarrassing, but so what? And now it's gone on to this craziness of this criminal behavior where every time he gets indicted, he goes up and he gets more money. Like, he is desperate for a picture of himself in handcuffs, which, until now, in every other situation I've ever known, would have been death for a politician. For him, it's a plus. It's absolutely Kafkaesque. Like, up is down and down is up, and it's a terrible example for kids. It's a terrible example for anybody wanting to go into public life. It's just nuts everywhere.
It's interesting. I hope that there isn't a lesson there, but I ended up at a dinner table conversation having a big debate at one point in time about, is there a lesson in there for people that run into problems elsewhere? For an example, Patrick Brown, when he had some issues about him during his leadership of the Progressive Conservative Party in Canada, and he, within a short couple of hours, gave up. And I was with dinner with someone who was saying, no, he should have done a Trump. He should have just said, doesn't matter, and gone on.
Well, I think on the Patrick Brown situation, it's a very tricky situation because, in my day job, we advise people in those situations. And one of the things that we're always keen to do is move quickly because the way public opinion forms, the news cycle works, and so on, you're not really rewarded for taking your time. But of course, for every rule, there's an exception which makes that rule. And sometimes, and I think Patrick Brown may well have been one of those times. He panicked. Listen, I wasn't inside Patrick's head that night, so I don't know. But it looks like he panicked. And just by watching that videotape of him, he actually looked like he, sort of didn't know where he was. And I don't mean that in a disrespectful way, but he just looked like he was completely stunned, and he was, going through these motions. And, I'm not sure he couldn't have survived that one. I think that, sometimes there is a time to stand your ground and to fight. And so the idea that you always have to move with alacrity, you've always got to move very quickly, well, mostly true, isn't always true. And that's why you need some judgment at those times.
And Trump just stood his ground all the time on every single issue, and he gets more support. It's just amazing.
The only other thing I would say, though, Brian, is that Trump is, as the lawyers would say, sui generis, right? He is one of a kind, right? This guy.
He could walk down Fifth Avenue and shoot someone, and no one would pay attention.
He used to phone radio stations and pretend to be a bloody publicist. The guy, he knows no bounds, right? And maybe that's a way to live. I couldn't live that way. I'm sure you couldn't live that way, but maybe if you're willing to, that's how you get to be a billionaire. I don't know.
I used to work with someone that ended up being a billionaire that was sort of like that. Anyway, different story.
We're going to take a break. A lot of them are, right? Of course, psychopathy, shows itself in that space, more than it does in the rest of the population. But that's a story for another show. We're
going to take a break. We're going to be back in just 2 minutes with Jamie Watt talking about his book, about his columns, and what he would have said or what he would like to change. Here we are with a fascinating individual with a fascinating book. We're going to be back in 2 minutes. Stay with us, everybody. Welcome back, everyone, to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960. My guest tonight is Jamie Watt. He is the chairman of Navigator Limited, Canada's leading high-stakes strategic advisory firm. He has written a book called What I Wish I Said, a collection of the most thought-provoking Toronto Star columns for the last 6 years, but with a twist. After each column, he says what he would have said. And it's a fascinating review. I had an opportunity interviewed Jamie a couple of months ago about a transplant that he went through, and I got a ton of really interesting responses. So Jamie is a fascinating individual, an excellent political columnist, obviously a successful strategic advisor. And outside of Navigator, he currently serves on several boards, including the University Health Network and the Shaw Festival, as Chancellor of OCAD University and an adjunct faculty member of the Director's Education Program at the University of Toronto. He's committed to developing Canada's next generation of leaders. He's also deeply passionate about promoting human rights and equality. He's received numerous accolades, including the Eagle Lifetime Achievement Award and the Queen's Golden and Diamond Jubilee Medals. What's the Eagle Lifetime Achievement Award, Jamie?
So EGAL is the equality rights group that has fought for equality for lesbian and gay and trans people in Canada. And I spend a lot of time with them. In fact, I housed them in my office and in our attic for 6 years as we fought through a series of legislative changes that culminated in equal marriage. And so it's been the fight of my life to move that from employment benefits. As you can imagine, we even had to fight for those, and then all the way through to amending, all the relevant pieces of legislation, changing the definition of spouse and what that meant, so that simple things like gay couples could, when they were in a nursing home, as they got older, that they would be included in the Nursing Home Bill of Rights, where where couples need to be housed together in the same room, and if they can't be, they need to be accommodated so that they can spend time together every day. And if you can imagine, until that was done, same-sex couples had no such standing. So that was a big fight, and EGAL was very nice and gave me their award.
Congratulations.
It's a bit like going to your funeral, I gotta say. But I'm not really old enough to have a Lifetime Achievement Award, and people are saying these nice things about you, so I think, okay, there you go.
Well, I don't know if you ever met my best friend for a long period of time, Stephen Cox, who was a Liberal and then a Green Party member. And I don't know how he got on the list, but we came to a bunch of the different events that your organization held after election campaigns to brief And he had the utmost respect for you because of exactly your support of that issue. And so on his behalf and mine, I thank you and
No,
congratulate
thank
you
you.
for that.
It's funny now, it's so wonderful, but it wasn't always this great, right? We've come a long way. And and there's an issue where people change their minds, it wasn't very long ago where we had almost no support for equal marriage. Then we got a little bit more, a little bit more, a little bit more. And today we have almost 90% of Canadians supporting it. And so those people changed their minds. They had a point of view, either through their lived experience or thinking about it or reading about it or watching Will and Grace or whatever the hell it was. They actually came to a new point of view. So I think there's courage in changing your mind. I don't think there's anything to be afraid of. And sort of wrote a book about it.
Excellent. Well, people do change their minds,
Yeah,
and I think
100%.
that people's attitudes change over time, and society's attitudes change over time. Stephen, just to stay on that for one topic, didn't come out to me until he was over 30, and
Right.
and he was my best friend in university, and we spent a lot of time together. And when he did, I said, "Well, I knew this,"
Right.
and so I don't know why it took so long, but and it wasn't him changing my mind; it was him changing his own mind that he actually could be out.
But remember, I mean, if he's your age, what life was like for him in high school, what life was like for me in high school, and every single bloody message you got from the moment you were born, was this was bad, it was terrible, it couldn't be, you couldn't live like this, you wouldn't have a good life. Then people said horrible things. I mean, they didn't obviously mean it directly, but that's the world you lived in. So you convince yourself that this is a secret that you can't keep, and it stunts your life. It precludes you from doing all kinds of things, and eventually you figure it out. But I had dinner last night with someone who's exactly my age, and he's never been able to. He's had long-term relationships, and his parents obviously know. One of them is dead, and one of them is like 100 or something. But he has never been able to tell them, and it was very hard. It's a different time, and just because things have changed so quickly, we can't lose sight of how hard it was. And there was a reason that he couldn't tell you, right?
That's interesting. Why did you want to write this book? Why did you want to go back to all your columns that you've written over the course of how many years?
6 years. I've written it. I wanted to write it because I was sick and tired of people not taking accountability for what they said. I was tired of reading columnists and listening to people on television, radio shows like yours, shooting their mouths off, either verbally or in writing, and the next day or a week later, whatever, when they were dead wrong, not taking accountability for it, not saying I messed up or whatever, or when I was ahead of the game, I got something right, I saw something other people didn't see, and I just think that this lack of self-reflection for people who do this for a living is a bit nuts. And so I thought, you know what? I'm going to take it. I'm going to have a go at it, and I'm going to see what that would look like. And so I thought it was important to do it for that reason. And that's probably the biggest thing that got me writing this book. I mean, I always wanted to do a book, and I thought, I got this idea, so I thought that would be a way to get that done.
I think it was Pierre Elliott Trudeau, who at one point in time, I'm going to paraphrase this terribly, but said something to the effect of when someone confronted him about a change of policy. Well, when I understand different facts or hear different facts, I consider them. What do you do? Was his retort to a reporter that asked about a change of a policy. But
and and people can have their view on Trudeau, whether you liked his politics or not. But for sure, he was one of the most intellectually gifted prime ministers, this country's ever had, right? And I think it was that Jesuit, upbringing that he had, and that commitment to intellectual integrity, intellectual honesty, which allowed him to say that, right? I mean, who isn't persuaded? Isn't that how we form our opinions? We have an opinion, then we go to dinner, and our smart sister-in-law explains that to us. Oh, I didn't really think about it that way, or as I say, experiences change. I think there's a lot of different, ways to do that.
Go off on a tangent just for a second. I went to Oppenheimer. I'm not sure if you've had pleasure.
I haven't seen it yet. No, how is it?
God, you got to go. It's one of the most interesting movies I've seen in a long time. But it makes you think about nuclear war and the fact that this inventor of the atom bomb really debated whether both publicly as well as privately, and morally as well as theoretically, whether what he had done was the right thing. And I don't know whether the conversation they described with Einstein. Oh, I'm not giving it away. No, I won't go there. I won't tell you. I won't take it away.
Now the real question, Brian, I got to ask you is: have you seen Barbie?
I did do this. I did the double feature, and you know what? It was stupid to do it because it's like 5 hours worth of movie theater, but it is the perfect combination because one is so heavy and the other one is so unbelievably light. And to our quality discussion that we just had, the speech that you hear in the middle of the movie about women's rights or women's position, people clapped in the theater, as I think several people have commented in the press that people do. It was a very moving speech in a very light hearted movie. And so
well, I'm looking forward to seeing both.
Beg your pardon?
I'm looking forward to seeing both.
I would commend Oppenheimer to you incredibly well. And you could wear your shirt sort of to the Barbie movie and people would think you're fitting in. So why do people not change, or at least admit that they were wrong? Like, I think about Danielle Smith and a lot of these podcasts that she's been so incredibly criticized about, and she really hasn't admitted that she was wrong, or she said, oh, well, that was a podcast. There's so many people that won't admit that they've made a mistake. Why? Is it just pure embarrassment, or they think that
I
come out weak, or what?
Yeah, I think people are, certainly I think people who are, weak or uncertain, they cling, what does Churchill say, is the hobgoblin of, small-mindedness, right? And I think that, people are scared to change their minds sometimes. But I also think in politics, we've created the wrong construct, because as soon as a politician changes their mind, someone screams flip-flop, right? And they flip-flopped, as opposed to, no, I've reflected on this and I have a new point of view, as you quoted Trudeau as saying. And so I think this flip-flop business has made it absolutely impossible for politicians, to do that without getting themselves into trouble. And I think that has, permeated society more generally. But I can tell you, I've been out selling this book, and I give a little talks, as they expect authors to do. And one of the things I talk about is that, I hope this idea of having people change their minds a bit will help us get rid of this terrible polarity, which is infecting our politics, where we have extremes, right? We have people at either ends, like we see in America and we're beginning to see in Canada. And there's no space in the middle for people that, want to be in the middle. And that middle space, sometimes called red Tories, sometimes called blue liberals, but that middle space, it's a uniquely Canadian point of view. And it's not something that exists in America, as we were just talking about a few minutes ago, but it does exist in Canada. And there is a yearning for that. And when I go, people don't talk to me about the Blue Jays or, sports or something like that. They talk about politics. And they're always telling me the same thing. They're hardworking people. They're raising their families. They're contributing to their communities. They're paying their taxes. They're doing all these kinds of things that we expect of Canadians. We compassionate, caring, wonderfully generous people. And they just want a common sense middle ground, right? And it's just back and forth depending on the time, sometimes a bit more fiscally oriented, sometimes more, progressively oriented, whatever, on social issues. But that's where most Canadians are. I was having dinner in Newfoundland and in St. John's in a little restaurant in Kitty Bitty, and some other people recognized me. They invited us back to their house, where we went and had a kitchen party till 3 a.m. And they're professionals. They work in Newfoundland and Labrador. They've lived there their whole lives. They've been there for hundreds of years, with families. And, they had voted for Mr. Trudeau. They're finished with him. But, Mr. Poilievre is too far on the other way, and they just feel homeless. And so, everybody, of course, is asking for, the greatest prime minister we never had, Robert Stanfield, who, if he ever was our prime minister, would have been a bum like everybody else, I'm sure. But people are looking for that middle ground. And I think part of that middle ground is not clinging to points of view.
That's interesting. So no labels in the United States that had this big presentation, what, a week or two ago in New Hampshire of a potential Democrat and Republican running on a ticket together, is indicative that there might be some movement. There are numerous Democrats that have complained that a moderate Democrat can't win a primary. And I guess you've got, a few, not many, but a few like Mitt Romney and Liz Cheney and people like that that have been in the Republican Party or still in the Republican Party that objected. So it is interesting that the middle ground in the United States is there, but shallow.
Yeah, and it's there, but it's the structural impediments to getting that going are so enormous. I mean, God bless them for trying, and I think that's all great. But I think anybody that looks at that will just tell you structurally that's just not possible. Like the money that the other two groups have, and you're just not going to be able to overcome it. And the depth of the way that system reverse cascades, right, goes up from all these community-based. So I think it's great. I think the media is desperate for it to happen, so they're giving it more coverage and more hope than it as a practical matter. I just don't see it.
John Manley and Martha Hall Finley penned a column recently that they were calling for a similar kind of centrist party, a new party in Canada. Tasha Sheridan and some people out west and in New Brunswick got the centerized Canadians that they're promoting. Is there a chance for another party in Canada?
No.
I was pretty definitive. Okay, we'll take that. Just a simple answer. You know what? Simple, straightforward answers are really helpful sometimes. We're going to take a break and come back in 2 minutes and talk a little bit more about the book. But I should ask before we go, if people are interested in this book, Jamie, how do they get it?
Well, you can get it wherever you buy books. So you can get in bookstores, or if you like to get your books online, you can get it at anybody who sells them online. You can get it at Indigo, you can get Amazon, or whatever independent bookseller you like. It's pretty much everywhere.
And I understand all the proceeds are being donated?
Yes. So I'm donating all of my proceeds, all of my royalties. I'm donating to the Center for Living Donations at University Health Network in Toronto. It's a center which is working to increase the number of people who are able to have the life-saving treatment that I had. And so I'm very, very committed to that. So all of my proceeds are going there.
And the book is called What I Wish I Said by Jamie Watt. We're going to take a break and be back in just 2 minutes with Jamie Watt. Stay with us, everybody. Welcome back, everyone, to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960. I'm having what I'm enjoying as a very interesting conversation with Jamie Watt, who is a chairman of Navigator Inc., very involved in the community, and author of a new book that is called What I Wish I Said, which is a collection of his most thought-provoking Toronto Star columns from the past 6 years, but with a twist. He comments after each column about what he wishes he had said. So, Jamie, you've told me a little bit about your the biggest sort of change of heart on Donald Trump. What about, have you got a change of heart about a Canadian politician?
Yeah, I don't know. That's an interesting. It's an interesting question. I think that I think Premier Ford has done better than a lot of people thought, and so I think that his ability to navigate through COVID was, I think, he did an amazingly good job, and certainly better than most people would have given him credit for. This, I'm not so sure I had a change of heart, but certainly recognized that he performed better than people would have expected, and that his ability to connect with people through that very, very difficult time provided a sense of leadership that was probably let's just say it wasn't present in every premier in the country. I thought he did very well.
I agree that, I was impressed and wasn't expecting him to be particularly as strong supporting the science during COVID. But then I thought that he was vulnerable in the last provincial election. I thought that the attitudes, near the end of his administration, during that first term had changed. And I was shocked that he won a majority and a strong majority. And I think one of the reasons was turnout was so unbelievably low.
And also, I mean, not to be disrespectful, but the Liberals ran just a horrid campaign. I couldn't understand, like day after day after day, they were talking about this, talking about that, when there was a very simple question. All they had to do was ask the famous Ronald Reagan question: "Are you better off today than you were when Premier Ford came to office?" And, people were having a very difficult time dealing with food inflation. It was, families were having to make very difficult choices. And you can say, well, that wasn't the Premier's responsibility. Of course it wasn't. But, in politics, you just have to ask people if they, where they think things like that stand. I do not understand. I would like open the paper, watch television, and I go, what are the Liberals thinking today? It had to go down. Look, I've run my share of really bad campaigns. People have had a lot to say about, some of my disasters, but I think that definitely went down as a disastrous campaign. No, there's no question. But also, I think don't just take that as the only reason he won. I think he won because, the Premier has a very, very, very highly developed ability to connect with people. And he uses it to his advantage, and he shouldn't be underestimated. He's the kind of leader that the chattering class, the elites, Laurentian elite people, like us who talk about things like that, tend not to like. And they need to understand that there's a lot more Jack and Jill front porches than there are people like us, and he understands that very well.
He does connect. There's no question. But lately I've been impressed with him on this housing affordability crisis that we're going through, and that he has taken more stronger action than frankly anyone I can remember. The only, again, a dinner table conversation, the only one that I can think of that took stronger action was Pierre Trudeau with wage and price controls. To override what municipalities are doing, to put in place targets, to Bill 23, Bill 109, all the different things that he is doing to try to speed up the approval of housing and attack this housing crisis. I never would have thought that he would have done it.
Right.
Taking really strong action.
That's when politicians sometimes they're challenged to do things in a different way. I think back to the financial crisis, and I mean, whoever would have thought Jim Flaherty, who was a very good friend of mine, and Stephen Harper would buy a car company. I mean, those two made decisions during that crisis which were absolutely antithetical to everything they believed, absolutely, without question. But they realized that no matter what their dogma was, what their outlook was, what their political philosophy was, that circumstances changed, and they had to look at things differently, and they had to do things differently, even if it meant doing things like so radically differently that people could never, ever, ever would never have expected the two of them to do that at all. But they did, and they turned out to be right. They also made a lot of money on those GM shares too.
Yeah, really. You talked about some of the misses. What about the hits? What's the most important hit that you got right?
So I think there's a couple. I think the one though that I got right, but I also was early. So the one that I was one of the very earliest to write about was the need to shift the way we dealt with the opioid crisis from a crime issue to a public safety issue. And I wrote how I thought it had echoes of the HIV/AIDS pandemic, and that at first that epidemic was very much about shaming, about gay men engaging in inappropriate behavior and so on, and then which just drove the problem underground, and it was eventually dealt with as a public safety issue, public health issue. And I think that the reaction we're now using to deal with that issue is a much better one. So I was early to call for that. I did that in 2017, and so in the development of that particular crisis, that was early. So I think that's one of my my better hits.
Well, it's interesting. So Pierre Poilievre has taken a very strong view about safe injection sites, against them. There was a candidate in the last Toronto mayoralty election that did so as well. And both of them have been getting some traction on those issues. What do you think of that? I
think they're profoundly wrong. I used to be the chair of KCOC AIDS Hospital. I've spent a lot of my voluntary career doing this kind of work, and they're just dead wrong. It's very nice to say that. It's great to have those sound bites, but it may well represent a lot of people's points of view. I respect that. People are entitled to their views, but they are dead wrong. It's just not going to fix the problem. We need lots of other things to fix the problem. Safe injection sites aren't the answer, of course. Safe injection sites are a horrible solution to an even worse problem. But safe injection sites should just be the beginning. What we should be using safe injection sites for as an entry point into the healthcare and recovery system. You see, right now, these people are totally disengaged and separated from any kind of intervention, any kind of healthcare support. And so what we should be seeing, I wrote about this, we should be using safe injection sites. We should see them as the front door, as the entry into the healthcare system, into a system of support, not just a place to shoot up. And that's a ridiculous notion of what they're about. And by the way, if you've ever been to one, it's not exactly a party atmosphere in there, right? They are stainless steel tables, they are bright lights. It's called a supervised injection site for a reason. And so there is nothing fun about them. But they are an ability for social workers, nurses, doctors, addiction specialists, and others to actually build relationships with people who are very, very, very troubled. And we have not been able to get them into care any other way. And I just think we need to stop yelling about this and making hay of it and actually start understanding on the evidence the best way to do it. Now, are there problems with it? Absolutely. Are there problems in neighborhoods? For sure. Should they be near schools and this and that? Of course not. Right? Of course not. But, and as I say, they are a horrible solution to an even worse problem. And that's the way that we need to look at it. So I understand that Mr. Poilievre, for his base and whatever, it may be a very effective political strategy, but I think on the merits on this one, he and I have to just disagree.
I interviewed an economist who said, he said very clearly, Brian, based on all the analysis, they save lives. Bottom line, they save lives. They may not solve a lot of other issues like mental health issues and opioid addiction issues and a whole bunch of other things, and that other policies need to be addressed. But if you get rid of them, more people will die. Bottom line.
But, you know, that's the whole thing. We put all these Band-Aid solutions and all these things, you know. I mean, we welcome refugees in this country, but we don't put supports into, you know, to make sure that they're housed and cared for it. I mean, just this is just what we're doing over and over and over again. You know, we still, after all these years, how is it possible we have all those northern communities still on boiled water advisories, right? Well, we know how to fix that problem. It just takes money and we're not committed to it, right? So
you write a column every week, and to be newsworthy, to attract readers, it's got to be, I would have thought, provocative, controversial. You've got to have an opinion in these columns. I am encouraged by my broadcaster to do rants, to make comments, to make statements, because that's what people want to listen to is the interviews, but also then what I, as the host, have to think about. What have you learned from this process of going back and rereading columns from 6 years and thinking about what you did right, what you said that was wrong? Have you learned something? Are you more humble or are you more less humble?
both. And I think that what your producer is encouraging you is something I've learned. I was allergic to using I would never write that. And then I was sitting down with an editor one day and asking how I could improve. And he said to me, you know, you have to make these things more personal. And because when you're a columnist, different from a reporter, people read you because they want to hear your opinion. And I thought, oh my goodness, you know, that's kind of not me. That's too much. And so I became more comfortable. And you can see if you look at my writing over the time, I did become much more personal. I became much more willing to reveal myself in my columns. And that's when my readership went up. And then the second thing I did over time was the second part of what you said. I was much sharper in my opinions. I'm not a rant person unless I've really worked up about something, but I'm not going to go on an artificial rant. And if people want that, they can read somebody else. You know, Adrienne Clarkson said to me that I'm the only she reads all the columns every week. And remember, she was a journalist before she was the Governor General. And she said, I'm the only columnist that she writes that she doesn't know what they're going to say, right? Everybody else, when she sees the headline, she knows exactly what their opinion is going to be. And she said, when I read you, I don't know what your opinions to be. I took that as an enormous compliment. When people say to me, I get, emails, things like you do, and they say, I'm a liberal, I don't really agree with you all the time, but you always make sense. You always have a reasonable point of view. And then often they'll say, and today I did agree with you. I thought you were right today. So that's my space. I'm not in the rant space, but I have learned to sharpen my my writing. It's much more precise. It doesn't meander as much. And that's why I say when you ask if I'm humble, more or less, I'm always humble because I'm always terrified, making some big, huge mess. But on the other hand, I'm much more willing to be sharp, definitive, and declarative than I was when I started. And I've gotten much better response for writing in that more direct way. So that has changed for sure. And you can see it when you read the columns over time.
I understand Adrienne Clarkson's issue with your writing, that she didn't know what you were saying. You've always confounded me because, I learned about you initially when I guess you were a political activist, operative, campaign manager, et cetera, with the Conservative Party. And then I met you and listened to numerous things that you've said and presentations that you made. And obviously, I guess the columns that you wrote, and was surprised at how socially progressive you are on so many different issues. Where do you fit in the political spectrum?
So I would call myself a red Tory. I know that's not a fashionable term today, but I would call myself a red Tory. I think that I'm very much a Brian Mulroney conservative. I believe in strong fiscal policy. I believe in strong defense. I believe in participating equally and as our responsibility is in multilateral organizations like NATO and so on. I think that we have a unique role, as Brian showed, as a middle power, that we've got enormous convening power and that we can do very important things. I think Brian's role in, bashing Margaret Thatcher and Ronald Reagan's heads around dealing with apartheid. I think when history is written, he's going to be seen to have played a absolutely pivotal role in that only Canada could have played. So I am a multilateralist. I think that we should stick up for ourselves, that we have a perspective on the world. I think we should have a strong defense. We should have a strong criminal justice system. But I'm also enormously progressive, and I am a Canadian. I don't think people should be left behind. I think that we're all in this together. I believe in the Charter, and I just think that we at our best, we're a very, very special place that we need to preserve. And from our founding until today, we are considerate of other people, of other perspectives, and so on. I mean, very few other countries would have been founded the way we have been. So I sit in that middle ground, and I think most Canadians are with me. I think the political discourse has shifted, and so the discourse has pushed people more to the edges. And but I think when you strip that away, there are more people with me than not.
I interviewed former mayor of Toronto and former MP David Crombie, who is a relative but not a close relative of mine, and he said his party had left him.
Yeah, I think that's that's something that I think a lot of people are thinking about, and I think David has gone a little bit further than I have, but I think it's I go back to that example of those couples in Newfoundland, right? They're just average Canadians, but I say that in the best way, and they're just looking for someone that reflects that space that they're in, and it's very hard to find these days.
We're chatting today with Jamie Watt, who is the author of an interesting book which critiques his own columns in the Toronto Star. It's called What I Wish I Said. It's available wherever good books are available online, etc. And all of his profits from this book are being donated to transplants. He talks about how it's a very personal book, and it is. When we come back as a close, we're going to ask him to read a column from the book that's a very personal account. Stay with us, everyone. We're going to be back in just 2 minutes. Welcome back to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960. I'm having a really interesting conversation tonight with Jamie Watt, chairman of Navigator, author of a new book, and he's going to read from this new book a chapter from it to give us a sense of how personal this is, and it's called "How an Organ Donation Saved My Life." Jamie Watt.
So, Brian, I wrote this on March 5th, 2023, so just over a year ago, and the column goes like this. A year ago, I had a kidney transplant, and since then, my life has changed in ways I never dreamt possible. To be able to dream of something, you have to be able to imagine it. But I could never have imagined my life today, much less dreamt it. In fact, I have no memory of feeling this well. Before my surgery, I'd been living with end-stage kidney disease. And like many illnesses that develop over time, you get used to being things just the way they are. But with kidney disease, you eventually get to a very bad place, a place where you're faced with three options: do nothing and die, undergo dialysis, or get a new kidney. And so while it's a surprise to many, a transplant is actually the treatment of choice for this disease, and that was what I was blessed enough to have. In every respect, I won the lottery of life. My partner and I were a match. I live in Toronto, the best place on the evidence on the planet to have your kidney transplanted. And our Medicare system ensured that I wouldn't be wiped out financially. Fortunate as I was, many are not. According to Canadian Blood Services, over 4,000 Canadians are waiting not just for life-saving, but life-transforming organ transplants. And this is no comfortable wait. People really suffer. Their lives deteriorate daily. And most tragically of all, the most unnecessarily and painful fact is that each year, for hundreds of our fellow citizens, time runs out and they die waiting. The reason for this is no mystery. There's simply not enough organs to meet the demand. And the solution isn't a mystery either. International comparisons show that Canada's donor rates are significantly lower than the United States, Spain, and France. And while I can't imagine there's a Canadian among us who thinks that's okay. The good news is the path forward has been discovered, tried, and tested right here in Canada. The approach is what's known as presumed organ transplant or opt-out legislation. In short, this means that people are presumed to consent to donate their organs after their death unless they opt out. In 2021, Nova Scotia became the first jurisdiction in North America to adopt this practice, and it's already saving lives. But the policy rationale extends beyond life-saving potential. People who require organ donation depend heavily on our medical system for vital care and support. Indeed, dialysis costs run roughly $100,000 a year. By comparison, a transplant costs $66,000 with continuing costs of about $23,000 a year for monitoring and anti-rejection medications. These are not insignificant savings for an already overburdened sector. There are, of course, many ethical dilemmas to navigate on this issue, and any future plans must guarantee that religious and spiritual convictions are respected. However, the opt-out policy option is a proven solution, one that saves lives. It's also a solution that matches the incredible compassion and generosity of the Canadian people. In the late Paul Dewar's final statement to Canadians, he told us that he saw his illness as a gift. I never truly understood this until I was lying by myself in an ICU bed with an IV in each arm, but now I do. The finest gifts fill you with a sense of awe, humility, renewed purpose. And today, I have a new life because the man I love risked his own. You can't quantify that feeling of gratitude, or touch it, or hold it in your hand. You can live out your life with humility and renewed purpose and awe. You can give back and tell your story, and you can keep the gift alive. And after each column, I write about 400 words about what I wish I said. And after this column, I just say, enough said. And that's the last column of the book.
Well, Jamie Watt, enough said. The book is called What I Wish I Said. I commend it to you. Let's go out and buy it, read it, and the contributions, the profits go to Transport. Jamie Watt, Navigator Inc., author of What I Wish I Said. Thanks so much for joining us. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, Brian.
That's our show for tonight, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. And, think about what Jamie said. Enough said.